If you want to be more effective in your work and in your life, and you'd like to have more confidence that you're meeting your intentions, this is where it begins. Welcome to Do Busy Right, helping you organize your information and manage your attention so that they work for you, not against you. We educate you and encourage you by discussing ways to be more effective, not more exhausted. Let's do busy right. Hi there. On this episode, I'm going to do a coaching meeting / interview. My guest is Chris Kraft, and Chris is a professional coach. He's the author of a book that is very useful. I'll get to that in a minute, and is a recent friend of mine and client. So what we're going to do, just to set this up, this is a meeting that's typical of the first coaching meeting that I would have in an attention compass implementation. It's the first of 8 weekly meetings that's typical, again, of attention compass implementation. So in this meeting, as a coach, I'm still motivating the work that my client's going to have to do. And I'm explaining mindset kinds of things that will help my client, in this case, Chris, understand why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. And I want to make sure that that sits pretty well, because if we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, then often we'll lose motivation on actually doing it. And so I want to kind of inoculate my clients against that. So you'll hear a lot of description of kind of the mental barriers that we face for productivity. This is a big conversation about waste, ways that we waste our attention and what we can do about those. And then off into the attention compass implementation that really is the tool set that supports the storage of information that has been created according to the workflows that we teach in the attention compass package. So I think there will be a lot of knowledge you can take away. You can start doing some of these things on your own without the tool set. And so I want to make sure that you understand what this looks like, primarily that you begin to adopt this mindset and begin to think about, oh yeah, well, these ideas can help me with my productivity. And then once you get to a point where you need the tool, then we can get together and I can help you implement the tool, or maybe by then I'll have another coaching option for you. So as you're listening to this episode, I want you to think a lot about Chris's approach to coaching. In addition to trying to take away the nuts and bolts of what I'm trying to teach him, I want you to learn that as well. But in addition, just listen to how Chris reacts and responds. So again, Chris is an accomplished coach. He's a professional guy. He works with people on mindset and new knowledge, trying to help people fill in the gaps. And that's the name of his book. It's called the Principle Toolkit. And it's the first in what Chris envisions to be a series of books in what he calls the 100-page Toolbox Series. And he'll talk a little bit about what that is as we get the episode started. So when you're listening to him, although he's an accomplished guy, he knows that he doesn't have the best handle on these ideas, and he believes that I do. And I, of course, agree with him. And so he's trying to understand what's going on. He's trying to, and he'll say this several times, he's trying to take out whatever I've got and put that in his own toolbox, in his own toolkit. And so I think this will be very helpful for you. Now, even though he's a smart, accomplished guy, he's very well read. He just doesn't turn his brain off, but he's trying to learn. He takes a very humble approach, and I think that's a model that we could all adopt in our own practices. So listen to how interested and motivated and invested he is to learn and get better at managing his attention. So as you listen in, there's a couple of things that I want you to a couple of additional things I want you to think about. The first is, this is a live coaching meeting. It's not scripted. So one of the things I want you to take away is I want you to have an idea of what working with me is like as a coach. And when I work with clients, we explore different ideas and different approaches and mindsets. And I, of course, have a coaching, persona, my personality comes through in my coaching. And so I hope this gives you a glimpse into that as well as we walk through this recording. So I want you to be thinking, could I work with Larry? Can I envision myself in Chris's seat? How does Larry communicate? Chris and I communicate very well. We've actually become friends in the brief time I've known him, and we envision some projects together. But that said, we have a common communication style. And so, that's part of hiring a coach, is making sure that it's somebody that you can work with, that you can be coachable with. And so if it's a constant argument, a constant debate, then nobody gets anywhere. But I think if you kind of listen to my approach and how we do things, he and I are actually having fun during this coaching session. You may want to ask him if he's also having fun, but if you listen to him, it sounds like he's having fun. So think about that. Can I picture myself in Chris's seat in this conversation? And then, that's really part B of that is pretend that you're being coached here. How can you apply these ideas in your own situation? Does what I'm saying make sense to you, or do I need to explain more differently? It's my job to explain this in comprehensible ways. Now, I can only go so far, but it's my job. Is if you don't understand what I'm saying or it doesn't make sense to you, is for you to say, hey, Larry, that doesn't make sense to me, and for me to try to explain it another way. That's what good teachers do. And so as you're listening, listen to Chris ask questions. And if you think he's left something out, then by all means, shoot me an email and let me know that, hey, Chris didn't think of this, but I've got this question. And that way I'll have some information and some feedback and hopefully be able to answer that question on a future episode of the podcast, or maybe just answer it directly to you via email. I'll give you my email address so you can reach me. It's larry@dobusywrite.com. And I'll put that in the show notes as well so that you don't have any problem getting hold of it. But if something occurs to you that just doesn't make sense out of what we talk about, or you've got an idea about an extension of these thoughts, then I'd love to hear from you about that. And finally, there's plenty, I believe, of actionable material here on managing interruption, dealing with multitasking, and handling distraction. So listen for action steps that you can take away and immediately implement against them. I intend for my coaching to be very practical and to be very much a source for you of ideas of things that you can do tomorrow when you get to your desk, or today for that matter. Some of it's mindset, but you'll also see some takeaways, some things that you can do. So listen for those things and jot them down, and then try to implement against them. Try to solve these issues that Chris and I are bringing up in your own world with your own tool set. And then as you're trying to implement that, it's another source of conversation with me. You might run into roadblocks. Certain things might not work out the way you envisioned them. And I'd love to hear from you on that front by several mechanisms. So shoot me an email and I'll find a way to help you, kind of despite your budget or whatever's going on there. So let me know what kind of help you need. Maybe I can just record another podcast for you. So I want you to be more productive starting tomorrow. And it may just be a little bit more productive. It may just be an incremental thing for you as you adopt these mindsets and practices. And if you adopt them and it works for you, well, sure enough, let me know that. I'm like everybody else. I like to have encouragement now and again, and would love to have some from you. So that was kind of a long-winded introduction, and I hope that you're ready now to get to the meat of this episode. So here I am in an edited conversation with Chris Kraft. I have with me a fellow coach and a friend, recent but very good friend, Chris Kraft. Chris, we're here together today because we want to talk about how to begin to implement Attention Compass. But I do want my audience to know a little bit about who you are and what you do. And I think my audience would be most interested in who your target audience is and how you best help them. So give us a quick introduction to your coaching and what you help people do.
It's an honor for me to be able to be on Larry's podcast with him today. My name is Chris Kraft. My company, Blood Flow Coaching, focuses on both individual coaching and group coaching in areas of personal and professional development, as well as financial education and literacy, especially for the individual, kind of filling in the gaps of what the traditional education system dropped, because most of us would probably admit that we weren't fully prepared by the traditional education system for life. So one of the things that I focus on in my coaching, whether it be with middle managers of business or those in the C-suite or whatever else, comes down to what gaps do you have in your business that are causing the lack of results that you have. And most of the time I see that it's two things, and it's the two areas of focus I have. It's either communication or processes and systems. So I'm really eager to find out more and to dig into the Attention Compass for the fact that I'm going to see it as a benefit for myself and my coaching, but really I'm going to also see it as a priority to plug some of my clients into, because it's going to be a really good part of my system when I'm teaching other people to implement better processes and systems. So thanks for having me on today, Larry.
So Chris, when we talk about doing busy right, one of the things I tell people is anytime you go into a business or anytime you look at a process for improvement, and that's what we want to do, because everybody has a process. You're not talking to me because you don't know how to use email, and I couldn't teach you how to use email particularly. It's what I specialize in is taking people's process and saying, okay, well, here's a different process that you want to consider. My coaching is do it my way for a little while and then begin to add your own flavor and your own special sauce to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, you know that you're starting from good basics and fundamentals. And when we think about that, we look at processes and we go, okay, in a business setting, if you wanted to go into a business and you wanted to help them improve their productivity, an experienced coach, the first thing they would do in a productivity analysis is they would look for areas of waste.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's low-hanging fruit, and because with areas of waste, you get double bang for your buck, because waste is both producing something that's not terribly useful, but it's also consuming input resources. Now, in our world, it's producing results based on using your attention. And our attention is that productive asset. So if we've got waste, then we're using that productive asset, but not producing productive results. What do you think, Chris? Have you ever had any experiences where you had to look at somebody's process and say, oh, waste? I mean, you're a financial coach in some areas, right? Is there
Yes.
waste in many people's financial world?
that's it should be an obvious question to us, but unfortunately today it's not. There's the waste that comes down and I love the way you described that, because it's the perfect definition of waste. It's something that's producing something, but it's not the results that you're ultimately looking for. There's many people in today's society that have mastered getting into debt, that have mastered, hey, I can't afford my groceries. Well, I'm not really asking about your groceries. And this is really focused on what you asked, Larry, about waste. I'm asking about what other things are you spending money on that are not producing the life results you're looking for, that are causing you to be stressed with groceries. Many Americans are still paying $130 for cable TV, and they're not watching 1/5 of what's on there. They're too busy to watch cable, but they're still paying for that. That would be a great example of waste.
Yeah.
It's something that you're paying for that's producing something that you're not liking. And it's actually, and I'm sure you'll get here in future in the rest of our conversation, but it's actually producing stress in other areas. So the waste production is creating massive stress, not just in the area it's being produced in, but it's affecting it. The chain reaction is varied. So yes, financial waste is a huge area of people's lives.
Well, and I love the way you describe that. And, you're illustrating what a great coach you are in your own area of specialty. And thinking about those wastes in our attention does produce stress. And the stress that it produces when we waste attention, we don't feel like we're wasting it when we're wasting it. We feel like we're having entertainment or we're having relaxation or whatever those things are. And I'm not saying those things are bad in and of themselves, but just like the cable bill, right? If you're spending a lot of time on wasting your attention, then you can't get that back, right? Money, you can make more money. A lot of times you can make more. And a lot of people are able to earn their way over some waste in their finances. And they'd be better off if they just got rid of the waste itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, kind of back to attention compass. So we'll think about kind of three primary areas where people allow their attention to be wasted. And these are more systemic. Again, I'm not going to bang on you about your Netflix binge watching. We're going to abstract away from that and going to talk about three general areas of waste. So we'll deal with them in order of how easy they are to fix. And so the three primary areas of waste that I've identified with my coaching clients are interruption, it's the first, multitasking is the second, and that's a trigger word for a lot of people. So don't get triggered by that. We'll talk about it. And the third one is distraction. All of these three kinds of waste, we're really talking about areas where we are unaware or we unintentionally task switch. And that's really the source of waste and attention. So what do you think on the whole task switching notion?
I'm glad we're talking about this, Larry, because it's it's really interesting that as coaches we can let what we know get in the way of what we're applying. So I found myself as you were talking about that. I'm very guilty of this myself. So I'm really glad we're walking through this. And this is for our listeners, this is not me putting on a fake, hey, I want to be a coachee. And well, I'm on this call to learn from Larry's expertise. And when he talks about task switching, I don't think anybody listening on the call, including myself, is unfamiliar with that. We just don't know how to stop. We
Right.
find ourselves doing this subconsciously to where we get interrupted. We switch back and forth between three or four things. Our phones get in the way, our
Mm-hmm.
notifications, and I'm sure you'll get to all that. But
Mm-hmm.
with everybody calling on our attention, Stephen Covey would call that quadrant three. It's the urgent things that are not important.
Let's talk about definitional things here. So when we think about interruption, I define interruption as external calls on our attention. Okay. And we'll distinguish internal calls on our attention later. But interruption is the world calling to us and attracting our attention and potentially causing us to task switch, which is the immense cost that we pay. There is a waste. So let me back up and say that a different way. Most of our wasted attention is from task switching, right? And you've experienced this in your own world, right? When you task switch, one of the metaphors I use for people when you task switch is it's similar to if you're standing up reading a book and you drop the book, right? What do you have to do in order to get back to your reading task? Go ahead, Chris. You've had this experience. What do you do?
Yeah, you have to stop your attention of what you're doing. You have to bend down, pick up the book, find your page again, and figure out where you were. And by that point, you don't even remember what you were just reading. At least that's the experience I have.
Sure. Right. And when we abstract away from that, and mentally picture myself, flipping through pages going, oh, that sounds familiar, and flip a few more and, oh, no, that doesn't sound familiar. And then you back up a little bit. Right. And then maybe the worst part of all is when I finally find my place again, I have to read a few paragraphs to get the story back in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And so that reloading cost of getting back to your task, right? we have a particular mindset that we were in. So say you're trying to solve a problem and you get interrupted and you face this task switching problem. A lot of times it was just you had this mental picture of the direction that you needed to go, right? And something happens in the external environment. And what happens to that mental picture in your world, Chris? What happens?
It disintegrates sometimes. Just I can't even remember half of it. I can't wait to hear thoughts about how to stop some of this because it's
Yeah.
so easy to fall into.
Well, and the first thing for me is always identification. Okay. So now, interruption, this external call on our attention. Now, I start with this one because the systems that we have in place are actually pretty good at helping us deal with interruption, right? The social cues that we put out about, I don't want to be interrupted. We close doors, we go to coffee shops where we can be anonymously uninterrupted. And in an office setting, even in a cube farm, a lot of people will buy an inexpensive headset that never gets plugged in, but they'll just wear it when they want to send that "don't interrupt me" signal.
Yeah.
And so we do have these social structures in place, except for two areas. You know how to turn off your phone, right? It's the act of being willing to turn it off, of being willing to say, hey, the world can get along without me for 30 minutes, right? It's having your voicemail system set up so that you're confident that if you don't answer it, you'll still get some version of the information that people want. So, thinking about those interruptions, the other interruption, and this one is a little bit hard to see, is our computing environments. So, listeners, Chris and I are on a Zoom call, and we actually have each other's pictures up, and we've done Zoom calls before, and everybody's getting very, very comfortable with that. But most people that I talk to, their Zoom window is one of many windows on their screen, currently open while they claim to be focusing on having a conversation. How close to home was that, Chris?
Oh, very much so. And it's really funny because that is one of the number one things that I talk to my clients about is I try to help them understand, hey, right now, whatever you're doing, I can see your eyes going between 3 and 4 places. Where is that an interruption? How can we limit these things? So I'm looking forward to learning some of this because we can say we're focused all day long, but if we're really true with ourselves, every one of us could be better. And some of us could be 80% better. Some of us could get 10% better, but either way, our
Sure.
productivity will increase when we limit some of these things. So can't wait to hear your
Absolutely.
thoughts.
It leads to this notion of visual distraction, which is definitely true on our computers. So visual clutter generally I classify as an interruption. So
Makes sense.
even in your physical world, if you have a corner of your desk and there's a stack of bills on there that need to get paid this afternoon, okay, and you're working and you're focusing on something else, what actually happens, and this is a very small time slice, but I think it's illustrative, is that stack of bills catches your eye, catches your attention, because it is a visual cue to do something.
That's really good.
And at best, you're able to very quickly say, no, it's not time to do that, and get back to where you were focused. But it might be, oh yeah, what about that bill from the doctor's office that I wasn't so sure I wanted to pay? Hang on, let me look into it. Bingo. Where are you, Chris?
It's in my head. I just thought of the conversation my wife and I had yesterday because we are both. So her personality, and it's not even a blame thing. She knows this. She's very bad about wanting to do something, and then she'll go into a room and she'll see the 6 things that need to happen in that room. And it's more a physical representation of what you're talking about visually.
Sure.
But she'll walk into a room and she'll see that bookcase really needs to be straight, and she'll walk over. We should really dust this. Then she's dusting. She forgot she probably needed to come put clothes in. Like we completely forget the original thing we do. So I'm literally looking at the room around me. And I think all of our listeners should do this right now. Look around the room right now. and notice how many visual cues you could be distracted by. Right now, there's 2 boxes of Kleenex. I should throw one away and put it in there. There's a book that I have a class in a few minutes that I really need to study. There's a blanket over there that really needs to be folded. All of a sudden, I'm not even in our call, and I've missed the last 2 minutes of our call because of the visual cues. I think our listeners are experiencing this as we speak. And in fact, because you did what I asked you to do, you may not have heard anything else I said. So, Larry, tell us how to fix this, man.
Well, specifically in the computing environment, okay, multiple windows open, okay, is visual distraction, at least potential visual distraction. Clutter on your desk. Actually take the time to minimize the other windows, okay? And that's a good way to go. Now, is your note-taking app up? Yes, it is. I've got a clock up because that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to keep track of our time. And so some of those things are necessary, but think carefully about that. And a lot of people have one computing environment and they have their Zoom window here and their spreadsheet open here and their email open down here. And email and chat are the worst. Okay. If you have a spreadsheet up, then that's one thing. It's not going to call at your attention the same way a new email or a new chat line is going to call at you. So one tactic is to make sure you're at least minimizing that, if not taking the full step of literally closing the window, right? Which has an additional impact on our mind and our mental state to close that window.
That's perfect. And I wanted to throw one more thing out as you were talking, and this may be more for the computer nerds because some people think, well, I only have one window open and it's my internet. But if you have 14 tabs that are in that, because again, I don't want us to get super specific, but I just looked up and saw I have my Google Drive open as a second tab. That can very easily be a visual interruption for me because it's still calling my attention to somewhere else. So I just got convicted and actually closed that tab. So now I have my notes with only one tab, so nothing else is called. And I love the term you use there. And as a coachee in this situation, I'm not the one coaching, which I love. As a coachee, I love the word that you use of calling. Like what am I allowing to call me? And that pulls my attention away. So that's fantastic.
Yep. And taking advantage of that early and saying, okay, I'm going to take 30 seconds and I'm going to prepare for this, just like you prepare for a meeting, ideally. We get to actually having time for meeting prep in lesson 6 of attention compass coaching. But that prep and that just the seconds it takes to kind of shut that down. And, a lot of my clients go, well, that doesn't bother me, right? It's like, okay, why take the risk, right? Take the seconds. So interruption. So we talked about both interruption is external calls on our attention. And we talked about dealing with other people with closed doors, go to the coffee shop, put on your headset. We talked about turning off your phone, and we talked about cleaning up your visual environment, both on your computer screen and your desktop, so that it doesn't call to your attention. So that's interruption. And as I said, pretty easy to deal with from a technical perspective because we have all the tools in place. The second area of waste that we'll talk about is multitasking. I know, Chris, because we've had this conversation before, that you have a specific opinion on multitasking, and you've made it pretty clear what it would be, but just go ahead and say it.
Very clear. Multitasking does not exist. It's
Okay.
the book suggestion I always give to people that talks about switch tasking, like you talked about, is The Myth of Multitasking by Dave Crenshaw. A very small, very easy book. But when we even know this. We even know, well, multitasking, blah, blah, blah. Well, or women can multitask. We hear all these different myths about multitasking, but ultimately, scientifically, it's been proven time and time again that you're exactly right. We're very much like computers. We switch back and forth between things. And even though we know this, we're still very poor at managing it. And
Yeah.
that's what I think one of your strengths is helping people dive into some of these things.
There is a subset of my audience that refuses to let go of the idea of multitasking. So I define multitasking in a very specific way that I think most people can agree with. Multitasking, as I define it here, is lack of intentional focus on one thing. We do it in almost a premature effort to be efficient. It's kind of a naive effort at efficiency, right?
It's really
Because we're
good.
like, ooh, I have this little tiny time slice. Let me fit something in here. Okay. Well, that's not a good approach because like your wife, right? And I do it. I get up because I want to refill my water and I walk by and the dog bolts in.
Mhm. Yep.
And it's like, but and then the next thing you know, you're in there. And as you said, I think in your illustration, I forgot why I came in here. So I go back to my desk with my water cup empty. And so, do it all the time. And so just guarding against that and really changing your mindset. And whether you think you're a multitasker or not, I agree with Chris. I think the science is very clear that humans can't do this.
Do you think that one of the reasons we multitask so much is we don't understand how important focus is?
Hmm.
And I we just really don't understand how much more we could get done if we didn't try to switch task.
Mhm.
And do you think, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, how important is focus into our productivity and everything else? And maybe do people just not understand how important it is?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say focus is huge, but I think focus is has been mysticized. Okay. And when I say focus to people, and you may be experiencing this as you're listening, Chris said focus, I say focus. A lot of people's first impulse is, some Buddhist monk sitting on top of a mountain in a lotus position going on. And therefore it's this mystical thing. And I'm not even bringing in the religious aspects of some of that, but people think it's some superpower and that it's beyond them. Okay. And so what I help people try to understand is, hey, focus is not something that's mystical, it's something that's practical. And it's something that, much like if you're going to drive your car, you have to be in the driver's seat. Okay. Focus is a lot about our environment, our attention. Okay. And it's not lying on a bed of nails trying to ignore something. It's not gritting your teeth. It's setting up your environment such that we eliminate these calls on our attention. So if you want to be comfortable, why spend 7 years trying to learn to lie on a bed of nails when you could spend 7 minutes trying to learn to lie on a mattress? But people say, okay, I need training wheels. I need a beginner exercise in mindfulness. What should I do? My coaching there is, if you're not already able to do it, is to sit down and read a book.
Mm.
It's perfect mindfulness practice because all of us have had the experience. We say we're reading a book and your eyes move across the lines,
Mhm.
and then you go for 2 or 3 minutes and you realize that none of those words have actually entered into your brain
That's really good.
because you were thinking about something else.
Hmm.
If you're not a reader and you're looking for a mindfulness exercise, pick up a book, sit for 15 minutes, read the book. Fiction is fine for this exercise, right? And think about what it is that you're doing while you're reading. Okay. Get immersed in it. Think about the things that cause you to fall away from that focus state of paying attention to the words on the page. So I know you, Chris, to be a big reader. So you're already beyond kind of step one there, right?
No, I was just going to say it's more even an idea of staying focused than becoming focused is what I heard you say.
Yeah. And
Is you
it's
you may get focused for a minute, but then staying there is the practice, is what I heard you say.
absolutely.
Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Absolutely. And that's a great point. Thanks for pulling that out. It's being able to, the practice is actually noticing that your attention has wandered
There it
and
is.
bringing it back. So in some ways, this kind of lack of focus happens, it happens to all of us, but in some ways, focus is like falling asleep. Okay. Very few people are able to say, oh, this is the exact instant at which I went from wakefulness to sleep. And the only way really you've been asleep is because at some point you wake up,
It's true.
right? And or partially wake up, whatever that is, right? And so losing your focus is that same way. You don't notice when it's beginning to happen. But what happens after some period of time, you go, oh, wait a minute. I was thinking about, right?
Very true.
And so that being able to bring your focus back and being patient with learning that process is key. And that's why we go with the time. The third primary area of waste is distraction. And distraction is different from interruption. Distraction is internal calls on our attention. So you see, Chris, and you alluded to this, you see how this fits with multitasking, right?
Very much so.
Because even if you intend to single task, you can still drift away. Okay?
Very easily.
I saved distraction for last because in my experience, it's the one that's hardest to deal with. Right. I mean, that's where people get this idea in mindfulness that my mind needs to be a blank. Well, no, I mean, your mind is not built to be blank. Right. So you're really asking for too much.
Mm-hmm.
But distraction is the stuff inside of our heads that calls to our attention. Okay. Very challenging to deal with. But I do have the tactic. The mistake is we store it in our skulls. The need to do this, we try to store in our 3 pounds of gray goo, where what we need to do is externalize it out into the world. We need to put cues around it so that we'll see it when we need to see it. Okay. And these are a little bit different for different people, but I'll give you an example of what these cues are. So one of my favorite illustrative tasks is doing laundry. Okay. Because laundry is very interesting in that in clock time, it takes 2.5 or 3 hours to do a load of laundry. But in attention time, it takes what? 5 minutes? 7 minutes?
Yeah, just real short.
Maybe of active focused engagement in this task. So you want to talk about where you can gain efficiency in your workday. Okay. You're delegating a task to the washing machine. And if you have to sit there and watch the washing machine, okay, then you're wasting both of your time.
Yeah. So you would say the washing machine is the system that
Yes,
you're giving the task to
sure.
do the work, and you don't have to give your attention to it.
Right. At the same time, however, none of us wants the laundry to sit in the washing machine overnight. So the danger is you start it and then you forget about
Now
it.
you're
Right?
talking to me.
And people who forget their laundry, we have a special term for them as well. We call them human beings. Okay, so, but really, I'm joking. But one of the things that I try to help people understand is you're not broken because these things happen to you.
That's good.
You're just human. And so we're building systems and we're getting better in order to literally get better. And you need these systems in place. So I was talking about the laundry. So what I do with the laundry, I work from home, like many of us do, and I'm happy to move the laundry along. It's not a big deal, right? And I can help out and keep things moving. And so what I do with the laundry, and it's got a buzzer on it, but we close the door and I'm away where I can't hear it. And I certainly don't want the buzzer to interrupt something else I'm doing,
Right.
right? Unless it's VIP laundry, in which case, right? So I leave myself visual cues in certain places. Okay. So I leave the laundry basket in the middle of the kitchen floor. And
Good.
so the next time I'm taking a break in my work rhythm, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go refill my coffee or refill my water or whatever. I'm going to see it. I'm going to go, okay, what about the laundry? And just that little bit of externalization keeps it out of my skull. And I know I'll deal with it the next time I go in there. Now, these cues, I don't go into great detail with anybody about these cues because they're different for different people and in different environments, right? Now, I would avoid a sticky note on the edge of your monitor for two reasons. One is that piece of plastic around your monitor, for those of you that don't know, is called a bezel, and they're shrinking. So the the post-it note people are very annoyed by this because the usability of their post-it notes is going down as the bezel shrinks. Um, but I don't recommend unthinkingly increasing your visual clutter for these
Mm,
cues.
that's good. Can
Be
you repeat
thoughtful.
that? That's a really good statement.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to simplify it,
I'm sorry,
but
go ahead.
not not unthinkingly create these physical cues. Think about a good physical cue and put it where it needs to be. Because even if we use physical cues, we tend to put them in our visual environment, which doesn't help as much,
Hmm.
right? So be thoughtful about that, right? If you want to be able to hear when the dryer goes off, not a recommendation, but get a louder timer, okay?
Hmm.
Set a specific alarm, right? Easy. Hey, set a time, okay? 45 minutes, right? Um, and then in the attention compass training, what we do is we set up a work rhythm for our days where we have periods of focus and then we have periods of scanning the external world for new tasks, new information, et cetera. And so what you'll
Excellent.
find yourself doing is you'll work for a period of time. Another myth about focus is that you should be able to do it for, hours on end. Okay. It's really difficult to pull that off, and it's largely unnecessary. If you can focus, and I mean really deeply focus for 30, 45 minutes, you'll be amazed at what happens to your productivity. You'll actually get things done and you'll complete tasks rather than pushing them along. Okay. So that's another tactic that we get into more in the deeper training. And so if we externalize the stuff, so here's the problem with externalizing it, Chris. If you externalize all the things that are in your skull, is it going to be six things?
No, no. 6,000, 6 million.
It's a huge amount of information. And we need to, the point of externalizing it is in the long term, and by long term, I mean 6, 7 weeks is all this takes. We convince our brain that our brain doesn't need to hold on to stuff. And that's when distraction starts to decrease.
That's huge.
So if we get all this stuff out of our skulls, out into a system, it's a lot of stuff. So we need to build a system that's very good. And I rely on my background in IT and data structures in order to have cobbled together a system that will actually help you deal with a huge amount of things. Listeners to our podcast are aware that Attention Compass is currently platformed on Evernote, and I recommend Evernote. They're aware that I have a love-hate relationship with the Evernote folks. Evernote folks, if you're listening out there, give me a shout. I'll give you some ideas about how to change your tool so that it works better. Um, but it's the best tool I've found for the purpose. And so a lot of the attention compass training is how do we structure this tool such that it supports this huge amount of unstructured information that we're going to produce if we actually get it all out of our skulls.
That's incredible.
What are your thoughts?
My first thought is I want to dive into the attention compass, and that's not just a sales pitch. That's literally I once heard it said that if you want $1 billion business, whatever it is, you need to solve $1 billion problem. And I think what you've done here, Larry, is that you've helped make people aware of things they feel but can't figure out what it is you've personalized these time wasters. And at least for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, these three ideas, when I become aware of them, the next step is that I want to fix them. But if I'm not aware of those three things, then I just feel stressed and overwhelmed because I don't know what to do. I feel like being busy more, pressing the gas more in the wrong direction is the only way to get where I need to go. So I think your highlighting of these three things is vital to be able to fix the stress. So thank you for highlighting these. I can't wait to dive into the attention compass, but I can't wait to also, and listeners of your podcast, make sure you make Larry's podcast part of your schedule. Because if you want to hear more from him to become aware of more of your human being issues, if you're like me, listen. I once heard it said, and this is what I'll leave the listeners with is I once heard a principle called define, learn, do. Most of us do it backwards. We do learn, define, which is what do I want to do? I learn all the lessons from when I mess things up, and then I define what my life looks like now. If we'll flip that around, I define that I want to be more productive. And then I want to learn from people who have fruit on the tree, like Larry, and I'm going to do what he did. And that's what I want to do is define, learn, do. So I appreciate the time, Larry.
Yeah, love it. The backstory of attention compass is I did it the wrong way. I did learn to find. Okay. But for folks that are on the fence about attention compass, that's work I've already done for you. You don't have to spend the 6 years it took me figuring this out. And I'm still working on it on your behalf.
Well, this is Larry. I'm back, and I think I can speak for Chris when I say we hope that you enjoyed listening in on our conversation. In closing, I won't reiterate a whole bunch because you can go back and listen to it, but you do see how we talked about the three primary wastes of attention. That's interruption, multitasking, and distraction. And you should have gotten some actionable steps. And if you didn't get any actionable steps on any of those three things, then for sure send me an email because I need to know these things. And so, again, my email address is larry@dobusywrite.com, and it's in the show notes. And I hope that you'll let me know either, hey, I found an action step, or hey, I didn't find any action steps, or whatever. Love to have a conversation. So I hope you walk away from that recording with as much motivation as Chris did. He was very excited. He now believes that there's some things that he can actually do that aren't just work harder, but there's actually ways that he can change his mindset a little bit and react a little bit differently to things, and some workflows that he can begin to put in place so that he's more productive with less stress. So, and I hope you've got a good perspective on what coaching is actually like. Maybe you've never had a coach. Maybe you've never been, mostly coaching is in sports, and maybe you've never been in a sport that you had coaching. So that's kind of what it's like. We just talk about stuff, and I sort of explain a point of view. And then it's entirely up to you how you behave from that. And then finally, I hope you'll take advantage of all the effort and learning I had to go through when I did it backwards, according to Chris's thought of do, learn, define. And now I'm in a position to be able to share all that with you. And it took me a long time to figure this stuff out, but I want to save you that challenge if I can, save you that effort. And again, put you on a path to be more productive tomorrow. I want you to work in the most productive ways. I want you to do busy right. I'll leave it there for now.
This is Larry Tribble, Ph.D. Thanks for taking some time to improve your task and information management on the Do Busy Right podcast. The show is dedicated to helping you think about how to get better at working. And we do this by improving your attention and your focus. I believe that your work is not just about your job, but about all the tasks that you do to turn yourself, your environment, and your relationships into what you want them to be. What we're really talking about here is the underpinnings of becoming who you want to be. The primary way I help people is through coaching the Attention Compass process. Attention Compass is 4 workflows and a tool set that support our information, task, and attention management. I help people with big goals to build habits that put them in a position to achieve. We do this by eliminating wasted time and wasted attention. If you'd like to know more, you can find me on LinkedIn or go to dobusywrite.com for more information. Have a good week, more effective and less exhausted. Do busy right.